Welcome to the channel. Share where you're watching from. We'd love to find out, so drop a comment below, and let's jump into the story. It was one of those moments no husband ever dreams of facing. My wife of 25 years, Laura, sat across from me at our kitchen table in Boulder, Colorado, and calmly announced that she was planning to start dating other men, starting tonight. I was sitting there, gripping a glass of Maker's Mark bourbon, completely paralyzed. The kitchen felt unnaturally quiet, except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. For a full 10 minutes, I didn't take a single sip. I just stared at the amber liquid, trying to process her words, as an unbearable weight pressed against my chest. It wasn't just betrayal, it was a kind of deep, aching emptiness that no amount of alcohol could ever drown out. I had heard stories like this before, whispers at work about men whose wives decided they needed to explore. I always thought those stories were exaggerated or only happened to people with flimsy marriages. But now, here I was, living that exact nightmare. Laura was supposed to be my partner, my rock, the person I thought would always stand by my side. I couldn't comprehend it. How could she be willing to risk everything we had built together for some selfish fling? The day itself had been ordinary, unremarkable, even. I'd left work at 6 p.m., humming to myself as I unlocked the front door of our suburban home. I was in a good mood, ready for a peaceful evening. But when I stepped into the kitchen, there she was, sitting at the table with a glass of red wine. She looked calm, too calm, like she'd rehearsed this moment in her head 100 times. Her serene demeanor immediately put me on edge. Something in her eyes, a glint of determination I didn't quite recognize, made my stomach knot. I set my briefcase down, poured myself a double bourbon, and sat across from her. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Laura gave me a small, almost apologetic smile and tilted her head slightly. "Jason," she began softly, "do you think I've been a good wife and mother over the years?" The question caught me off guard. Laura wasn't one to fish for compliments, and the earnestness in her voice unnerved me. After a pause, I nodded. "Of course. You've done a great job. Why are you asking me this?" Her smile lingered, but there was a flicker of something else in her expression, something steely. "Well, after 25 years of being just the good wife, I think I deserve a little something for myself." I raised an eyebrow, already sensing that this conversation wasn't heading anywhere good. "What's that supposed to mean, Laura?" She took a deep breath, her voice measured and steady. "Tonight, I want to go out with another man. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I feel like it's time I did something for me." Her words hit me like a gut punch. My grip on the glass tightened as I struggled to process what she'd just said. She didn't flinch, didn't even look away, just stared at me, as if daring me to argue. "You can't be serious," I managed, my voice low and uneven. But Laura wasn't backing down. She straightened her posture and met my eyes head-on. "Jason, I've spent my whole adult life being your wife, raising our kids, and putting everyone else first. Now I'm 47, and I'm realizing that time isn't on my side anymore. I want to know what it's like to still be desired, to still have options." Her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. "Options?" I repeated, my voice cracking. "You think this is some kind of game? We built a life together, Laura. You can't just toss it aside like it's nothing." But she didn't flinch. Instead, she stood up and calmly walked toward the stairs. "I'm not tossing anything aside, Jason. I'll be back later tonight. This doesn't change what we have, it's just one night. You'll see." I sat there in stunned silence as her footsteps faded upstairs. A few minutes later, I heard the sound of her rummaging in the closet. When she reappeared, she was transformed. She wore a sleek emerald green dress that hugged her figure in a way that made it impossible not to stare. The neckline dipped just low enough to leave little to the imagination, and her heels added an edge of confidence to her stride. Her auburn hair was swept into a high bun, exposing her neck and shoulders. "You're not leaving this house like that," I said, standing up and blocking her path. "I don't know what's gotten into you, but this stops here." She gave me a cold, amused look and placed a hand on my chest. "Jason," she said, her voice dripping with condescension, "you're not going to stop me. You wouldn't dare divorce me over this, you'd lose too much. And let's face it, where are you going to find another woman like me?" Her words stung, but before I could respond, she leaned in and kissed me on the cheek, mocking, dismissive. "I'll see you later," she said over her shoulder as she opened the door. "Or maybe I won't." And just like that, she was gone. As the door slammed shut behind Laura, I remained frozen in place, staring at the spot where she had stood moments before. My mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, confusion, disbelief. How had it come to this? I downed the rest of my bourbon in one bitter gulp and poured another. The house was eerily quiet now, save for the distant hum of passing cars on the street. For a fleeting moment, I thought about calling someone, maybe my best friend, Ethan, or even my brother, Kyle. But what could I possibly say? That my wife had just walked out the door to go on a date with another man? Instead, I let myself sink into the old leather armchair in the living room, staring out the window as memories of our life together began to surface. Laura had always been the kind of woman who turned heads. From the moment I met her in high school, she had this magnetic presence, an effortless charm that drew people in. I'd moved to Boulder with my family right before my junior year, and on my very first day at Summit High School, there she was, laughing with her friends in the cafeteria like she owned the place. She wasn't just beautiful, she was captivating. Her auburn hair seemed to catch the light just right, and her smile had a way of making you feel like the luckiest person alive if it was directed at you. I was instantly smitten, but back then, I was just another awkward new kid trying to navigate unfamiliar hallways. By some miracle, I managed to work up the nerve to ask her out a few months later. To my shock, she said yes. For the rest of high school, we were inseparable, at least, until senior year. That was when Laura's natural allure caught the attention of Ryan Keller, the star quarterback and all-around golden boy of Summit High. Ryan was everything I wasn't: charismatic, athletic, confident. I still remember the day Laura broke up with me. Her words were polite but devastating. "Jason, you're great, but I think Ryan and I have a connection I need to explore." She didn't even realize how much she had crushed me. Laura and Ryan were the king and queen of our senior prom, while I went with Lindsay Parker, a sweet girl who deserved better than being my consolation date. But life has a funny way of coming full circle. After high school, Laura went off to the University of Colorado, while I stayed local and attended Boulder State University, majoring in finance. We didn't see each other again until 5 years later, at a charity event hosted at the Stag's Hollow, a trendy new bar in town. By then, Ryan was long out of the picture, and Laura was single again. I still remember the way my heart skipped a beat when I saw her walk into the room that night. She was just as stunning as I remembered, but there was something different about her, an air of maturity, perhaps, or maybe it was just the absence of Ryan by her side. I had changed, too. Gone was the shy, lanky teenager she had left behind. I was now 24, confident, and starting my career at a growing investment firm. To my surprise, Laura struck up a conversation with me, and by the end of the night, she had slipped her number into my hand. We were married 2 years later. A new twist, an unexpected call. My thoughts were interrupted by the buzzing of my phone on the coffee table. I glanced at the screen. It was Samantha, our 22-year-old daughter. "Hey, Sam," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Dad, are you okay?" she asked, her tone immediately concerned. "Why do you ask?" "Mom called me earlier," she said hesitantly. She sounded off. She said something about needing to rediscover herself, but she wouldn't explain what she meant. "Is everything all right between you two?" I hesitated. How could I explain this to my daughter without turning her world upside down? "We're fine," I lied, though the words felt hollow. "Your mom's just going through something right now." Samantha didn't sound convinced, but she didn't push the issue. "Well, if you need anything, let me know," she said. "And, Dad? Take care of yourself, okay?" As I ended the call, I felt a pang of guilt. Samantha deserved the truth, but I wasn't ready to share it, not yet. I glanced at the clock. It was 9:30 p.m. Laura had been gone for nearly 2 hours. My mind raced with possibilities. Where had she gone? Who was she meeting? Was this just the beginning of something much bigger? I decided to pour myself another drink, but just as I reached for the bottle, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from Ethan. "Ethan, hey man, you up for a drink at the Copper Fox? Haven't seen you in ages." I stared at the message for a moment before typing out a quick reply. "Me, yeah, I'll meet you there in 20. If Laura could go out and do whatever she wanted, then so could I." By the time I pulled into the parking lot of the Copper Fox, a lively gastropub tucked away on one of Boulder's busier streets, the cold night air had started to clear my head. I spotted Ethan standing near the entrance, scrolling through his phone. He looked up as I approached and gave me a grin. "Jason. About time you decided to come out," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. Ethan had been my closest friend since college, reliable, easygoing, and the kind of guy who always seemed to know how to lighten the mood. Tonight, though, I wasn't sure even Ethan could fix this mess. The pub was packed, its warm lighting and hum of conversation offering a comforting reprieve from the storm raging in my head. We found a small table near the back and ordered a round of drinks. "So," Ethan said, leaning back in his chair. "You've got that look. The one that says something's eating at you. Spill it." I hesitated, swirling my bourbon as I debated how much to share. "Laura and I had a disagreement," I said carefully. Ethan raised an eyebrow, waiting for me to elaborate. "She's out tonight," I continued, keeping my tone neutral. "With someone else." For a moment, Ethan just stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then he let out a low whistle. "Damn. That's heavy." I nodded, taking a long sip of my drink. "Yeah. She says she needs to explore. Whatever that means." Ethan shook his head, his brow furrowing. "And you're just letting her do it? Jason, that's not like you. What choice do I have?" I shot back, my frustration bubbling to the surface. She made up her mind, and if I try to stop her, she'll just use it against me. She's got this whole narrative in her head about how she's earned this after 25 years of marriage. Ethan frowned, tapping his fingers on the table. "Look, I'm not gonna pretend to understand what's going on in Laura's head. But you deserve better than this. You've always been the guy who puts everyone else first. Maybe it's time you start thinking about yourself for a change." His words hit harder than I expected. Was he right? Had I spent so much time trying to be the steady, dependable husband that I'd lost sight of my own worth? Before I could respond, the sound of laughter drew my attention to a nearby table. A group of women sat there, their animated conversation cutting through the background noise of the pub. One of them caught my eye, a woman with short, blonde hair and a sharp, confident presence. "Someone you know?" Ethan asked, noticing my distracted gaze. I shook my head. "No. Just, zoning out." Ethan smirked, leaning forward. "Well, maybe it's time to stop zoning out and start living a little. You've got nothing to lose, right?" I rolled my eyes but couldn't help the faint smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. Ethan always knew how to nudge me out of my comfort zone, even if it was just for a night. As the night wore on, we ordered another round, and the conversation shifted to lighter topics: work, sports, the ridiculous antics of our college days. For a few hours, I managed to push Laura and her betrayal out of my mind. But as I drove home later that night, the quietness of the car brought it all rushing back. The house was dark when I arrived, and for a moment, I wondered if Laura had come home while I was out. I stepped inside, my heart pounding as I scanned the living room and kitchen. Empty. A quick glance at the clock told me it was almost midnight. She wasn't back yet. A new twist, the letter. As I climbed the stairs to our bedroom, I noticed an envelope propped up on my nightstand. My name was scrawled across the front in Laura's familiar handwriting. Curiosity and dread battled within me as I picked it up and opened it. Jason. By the time you read this, I'll probably still be out. I know you're angry, and you have every right to be. I can't explain what's driving me to do this, it's complicated, and I don't fully understand it myself. But I need you to know that this isn't about you. You've been a wonderful husband, better than I deserved in many ways. This is about me trying to figure out who I am beyond being your wife or the mother of our children. I know this doesn't make it right, and I'm sorry for the pain I'm causing you. I just hope that someday, you can understand, even if you can't forgive me. Laura. I read the letter twice, each word cutting deeper than the last. It didn't matter how she framed it, this wasn't just about her. It was about us, about the life we built together, and the fact that she was willing to jeopardize it for reasons she couldn't even articulate. I set the letter down, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and something I couldn't quite name. For the first time that night, I allowed myself to think about what Ethan had said. Maybe it was time to start thinking about myself for a change. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of my phone buzzing incessantly on the nightstand. Groaning, I grabbed it and squinted at the screen. It was a text from our oldest daughter, Emma. Emma, hey Dad, is everything okay? Mom's been acting strange lately. I sighed, setting the phone down without replying. How was I supposed to explain this to her, or to anyone? That Laura, the woman I'd loved and trusted for over 2 decades, had decided she needed a night out with someone else. After forcing myself out of bed and brewing a strong cup of coffee, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair where Laura had dropped her bombshell the night before. The memory replayed in my mind like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. By noon, I needed a distraction. I threw on a jacket and decided to head downtown. Pearl Street, Boulder's vibrant pedestrian mall, was bustling with life, street performers, families, and couples wandering in and out of the local shops and cafes. I found myself wandering aimlessly, my thoughts still tangled in the chaos Laura had unleashed. That's when I heard a familiar voice. Jason. I turned and froze. There she was, Laura, standing in front of the Maple Leaf Cafe, a cozy little spot we used to frequent on lazy Sunday mornings. But she wasn't alone. A tall, broad-shouldered man stood beside her, his hand resting lightly on her lower back. He was well-dressed, his tailored jacket and polished shoes a sharp contrast to my casual jeans and flannel shirt. Laura, I said, my voice tight. Didn't expect to see you here. Her eyes widened briefly, and for a moment, she looked genuinely startled. Jason. I didn't think you'd be downtown today. The man beside her extended a hand, his smile polite but guarded. You must be Jason. I'm Mark. I ignored his outstretched hand, my focus solely on Laura. So, this is what figuring yourself out looks like. I said, the bitterness in my tone impossible to hide. Laura's face flushed, but she quickly recovered, her posture straightening. This isn't what you think, she said firmly. Really? I shot back. Because it looks exactly like what you told me you were planning to do. Mark shifted uncomfortably, glancing between us. Maybe I should give you two a moment. No need, I interrupted, my gaze never leaving Laura. I wouldn't want to interrupt your date. Laura sighed, running a hand through her auburn hair. Jason, please. Let's not do this here. For a moment, the three of us stood there, an awkward triangle on the bustling sidewalk. Then Mark cleared his throat. "Laura, I'll grab us a table," he said, nodding toward the cafe. As he walked inside, Laura turned back to me, her expression a mix of frustration and guilt. "Jason, I know this looks bad, but—" "Stop," I said, cutting her off. "You don't owe me an explanation. You made your choice. Just don't expect me to stand here and pretend this is okay." Her eyes softened, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something I couldn't quite place, regret, maybe. "Jason, I never wanted to hurt you," she said quietly. "Then why do it?" I countered, my voice breaking despite my best efforts to keep it steady. She didn't answer. Instead, she looked away, as if the weight of her own actions was finally starting to sink in. A chance encounter. Feeling like I couldn't breathe, I turned and walked away, letting the crowded street swallow me. My emotions churned, anger, sadness, disbelief, all mixing into a toxic cocktail I couldn't shake. I ducked into the Ironwood Lounge, a quiet bar tucked away from the main street. It was dimly lit, with dark wood furnishings and the faint scent of leather and whiskey. Sliding onto a bar stool, I ordered a drink and tried to collect myself. "Rough day?" a voice beside me asked. I glanced over to see a woman about my age, her blonde hair pulled into a loose ponytail and a warm, empathetic smile on her face. She wore a leather jacket over a casual sweater, and there was an air of quiet confidence about her. "You could say that," I replied, managing a weak smile. She extended a hand. "I'm Claire. You look like someone who could use a distraction." "Jason," I said, shaking her hand. "And yeah, you're not wrong." Claire ordered a drink for herself, and before I knew it, we were talking. She was easy to talk to, funny, sharp, and refreshingly straightforward. She told me about her work as a graphic designer, her love of hiking, and her tendency to come to the Ironwood Lounge whenever she needed to clear her head. By the time I finished my second drink, I realized I was smiling, a real, genuine smile. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't consumed by thoughts of Laura and her betrayal. As Claire got up to leave, she handed me a business card. "If you ever want to grab a coffee, or go for a hike, give me a call," she said with a wink before disappearing into the night. I stared at the card for a moment before tucking it into my pocket. Maybe, just maybe, there was life beyond Laura after all. When I got home that evening, the house was dark again. The silence was heavy, almost oppressive, and I wasn't sure if Laura had returned or if she was still out with Mark. Part of me didn't want to know. I dropped my keys on the counter, poured a glass of water, and sat down at the kitchen table. My thoughts wandered back to Claire, her easy smile, her warm demeanor. It was the first time in a long while I'd felt like someone genuinely saw me, not just as Laura's husband or the stable rock for our family, but as me. As I sat there, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway broke the stillness. Moments later, the front door opened, and Laura walked in. She hesitated when she saw me, her hand still on the doorknob. "Jason," she said, her voice cautious. I took a sip of water, setting the glass down deliberately before meeting her gaze. "Laura." For a moment, we just stared at each other, the weight of everything unspoken filling the space between us. Finally, she sighed and set her purse down on the counter. "Can we talk?" she asked, her tone softer than I'd expected. I gestured to the chair across from me. "Go ahead." Laura sat down, her hands folded tightly on the table. For a moment, she seemed to struggle for words, her confident exterior cracking just slightly. "I ran into you today," she started, her eyes flicking up to meet mine. "At the Maple Leaf." "Yeah, I noticed," I replied, my voice flat. She winced slightly at my tone but pressed on. "Look, I know it probably looked bad, but it wasn't what you think." I raised an eyebrow, leaning back in my chair. "Wasn't what I think?" "You're out with another man, laughing and acting like everything's fine, while I'm here trying to figure out how the hell our marriage got to this point. So please, enlighten me, Laura. What am I supposed to think? She flinched at the sharpness in my voice but didn't look away. Mark is, just a friend, she said, though the hesitation in her voice made it clear even she didn't fully believe it. I needed someone to talk to, someone who doesn't have a stake in this. And you couldn't talk to me? I shot back. Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time, she looked genuinely vulnerable. I didn't think you'd want to listen, she admitted. Not after everything I've done. Her words caught me off guard, deflating some of the anger that had been building inside me. I don't know, Laura, I said after a moment. I don't know what I want anymore. She nodded slowly, her hands tightening around each other. I understand. I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. For all of it. I don't know why I did what I did, I guess I thought I needed something more. But today, seeing you at the cafe, seeing the look on your face, it made me realize how much I've hurt you. And I hate myself for it. Her voice cracked on the last sentence, and for a brief moment, I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with all those years ago, the one who'd laughed with me in the hallways of Summit High, who'd danced with me under the stars at our wedding. But those memories felt like they belonged to a different lifetime. Laura, I said quietly, I appreciate the apology, but I don't know if that's enough anymore. You made your choice, and now I have to make mine. Her eyes widened slightly, and for a moment, I thought I saw tears glistening there. But she nodded, a small, almost imperceptible gesture of acceptance. I understand, she whispered. A new beginning. The next few days passed uneventfully. Laura kept her distance, and I found myself throwing more energy into work than usual. I hadn't called Claire yet, but her business card stayed tucked in my wallet like a quiet reminder that there were possibilities beyond the mess my life had become. One evening, I decided to take a walk through Chautauqua Park, one of my favorite spots in Boulder. The air was crisp, the sky painted in hues of pink and orange as the sun dipped below the mountains. As I rounded a bend in the trail, I spotted a familiar figure sitting on a bench overlooking the valley. It was Claire. She hadn't seen me yet, her attention focused on the notebook in her lap as she scribbled something with a pencil. Claire, I said, approaching cautiously. She looked up, her expression shifting from surprise to warmth as she recognized me. Jason. Fancy meeting you here. I could say the same, I replied, gesturing to the notebook. What are you working on? She smiled, closing the notebook and tucking it into her bag. Just some sketches. I like to come out here when I need inspiration. I nodded, sitting down on the bench beside her. For a moment, we just sat there in companionable silence, the sounds of nature filling the space between us. How've you been? She asked finally, her tone genuine. Better, I admitted. Still figuring things out, but better. Claire tilted her head, studying me with a thoughtful expression. You look lighter, she said. Like you've let go of something. I chuckled softly, shaking my head. Maybe I have. Or maybe I'm just starting to realize there's more to life than holding on to things that hurt me. Her smile widened, and for the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Jason, she said after a pause, her tone light but sincere, whatever it is you're searching for, I hope you find it. And if you ever need someone to talk to, or to hike with, I'm around. Thanks, Claire, I said, meaning it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the valley in soft shadows, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe this was the beginning of something new, a chance to rebuild, to find myself again. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was ready to take that chance. The following morning, I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating on the nightstand. Half asleep, I grabbed it and saw a text from my younger daughter, Lila. Lila, hey Dad, can I come by today? Need to talk about something. Lila was 20, independent and headstrong, but she didn't usually reach out unless something was really bothering her. Me, of course. What time works for you? Her reply came quickly. Lila, around 2. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning up the house, trying to make it look a little more presentable. By the time Lila arrived, I brewed a fresh pot of coffee and set out a plate of cookies I knew she liked. Hey, Dad, she said as she walked in, her voice unusually subdued. Hey, kiddo. Everything all right? I asked, gesturing for her to sit at the kitchen table. She hesitated, biting her lip as she sank into a chair. I don't know, she admitted. Mom's been acting weird lately. Have you noticed? I let out a dry laugh, shaking my head. You could say that. Lila glanced up at me, her expression serious. She called me last night, she said. She sounded. I don't know, kind of lost. She kept asking if I thought she'd been a good mom, if I ever felt like she wasn't there for me. I frowned, leaning back in my chair. What did you say? I told her she's always been there for me and Emma, Lila replied. But honestly, Dad. I don't know if I believe it. She's always been so focused on herself, on what makes her happy. It's like she doesn't really see the rest of us. Her words stung, not just because they were true, but because they mirrored my own feelings. I think your mom's realizing that, I said carefully. She's been trying to figure some things out lately. It's complicated. Lila gave me a sharp look. Complicated how? I hesitated, debating how much to tell her. But Lila wasn't a child anymore, and she deserved to know the truth. She's been going through a kind of midlife crisis, I said finally. She feels like she's missed out on something and is trying to make up for it. It's caused some tension between us. Lila frowned, processing my words. Do you think she's happy? She asked quietly. The question caught me off guard. I thought about it for a moment before answering. I don't know, I admitted. Maybe she thought this would make her happy, but now. I'm not so sure. Lila nodded, her expression thoughtful. I just hope she figures it out, she said. For her sake. And yours. A new message. After Lila left, I decided to go for a walk to clear my head. The weather was brisk, with a faint chill in the air that hinted at the coming winter. As I strolled through Pearl Street, I found myself wandering into the Green Finch Café, a small, cozy spot with mismatched furniture and the smell of freshly baked pastries wafting through the air. I ordered a coffee and settled into a corner table, letting the hum of conversation around me fade into the background. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of calm. But that calm was short-lived. My phone buzzed, and I glanced at the screen to see a text from Laura. Laura, can we talk? It's important. I stared at the message, my mind racing. What could she possibly want to say now? After a moment of hesitation, I typed a reply. Me, what's this about? Her response came quickly. Laura, not over text. Can we meet tonight? I promise it won't take long. Part of me wanted to ignore her, to let her stew in the mess she'd created. But another part, the part that had spent 25 years loving her, knew I wouldn't be able to rest until I heard her out. Me, fine. 7 p.m. at the house. Laura, thank you. An uncertain reunion. By the time 7 p.m. rolled around, I was pacing the living room, my nerves frayed. The sound of Laura's car pulling into the driveway made my stomach churn. She walked in hesitantly, her usual confidence tempered by something softer, almost nervous. She wore a simple cardigan and jeans, so different from the polished, composed image she usually projected. Jason, she said, her voice quiet. Thank you for letting me come by. I gestured to the couch. Have a seat. She sat down, folding her hands in her lap as she searched for the right words. I know I've said this before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry, for everything. For the choices I've made, for the pain I've caused you and the girls. I've been doing a lot of thinking, Anne. I realized I've spent so much of my life trying to chase some idea of happiness that I lost sight of what really matters. Her words hung in the air, heavy with sincerity. For the first time, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't expected, compassion. I appreciate that, Laura, I said, my tone measured. But what do you want from me? Are you looking for forgiveness? Closure? A fresh start? She hesitated, her gaze dropping to her hands. I don't know, she admitted. I just know I can't keep pretending everything's fine when it's not. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of her confession settling over us. I'm not sure where we go from here, I said finally. But I think we both need to figure out what we really want, individually, before we can even think about what's next for us together. Laura nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. You're right, she said softly. I'll give you the space you need. As she stood to leave, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and something resembling hope. Take care, Laura, I said as she walked out the door. You too, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The next morning, I woke up feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The conversation with Laura, though emotionally draining, felt like a step forward, an acknowledgement that we couldn't go back to the way things were but could still move towards something new. Whether that meant closure or reconciliation, I wasn't sure. As I sat with my morning coffee, scrolling aimlessly through my phone, a message popped up. Claire, good morning, Jason. Hope your day's off to a good start. Thinking about a hike this weekend, care to join? A small smile tugged at my lips. Claire's timing was impeccable. She seemed to have this uncanny ability to sense when I needed a distraction. Me, good morning, Claire. A hike sounds perfect. Let me know the time and place. Her response came almost immediately. Claire, let's do Saturday, 9 a.m., Chautauqua Park. Wear your walking shoes. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of anticipation, something to look forward to. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. Frowning, I set down my coffee and went to answer it. Standing on the porch was Emma, my older daughter, holding a small box. Hey, Dad, she said, stepping inside. Got something for you. What's this? I asked as she handed me the box. It's a little project I've been working on, she said, her tone light but earnest. I opened the box to find a framed photo collage. It was filled with snapshots of our family over the years, vacations, birthdays, candid moments. In the center was a photo of me and Laura on our wedding day, beaming at each other like nothing in the world could ever go wrong. Emma, this is, I trailed off, my throat tightening. I know things have been hard lately, she said, her voice soft. But I wanted to remind you that no matter what happens, we're still a family. And that matters. I pulled her into a hug, feeling a swell of gratitude for her thoughtfulness. Thank you, Emma. This means a lot. She smiled, pulling back. You're welcome. Just, don't lose sight of what's important, okay? Saturday morning came quickly, and by 9 a.m., I was pulling into the parking lot at Chautauqua Park. Claire was already there, leaning against her car with a thermos in hand. She waved as I approached. Morning, Jason, she said, her smile warm and genuine. Ready for some fresh air? Absolutely, I replied, adjusting my backpack. The trail was beautiful, the golden autumn leaves crunching underfoot as we made our way up the winding path. Claire's presence was easy, her conversation light and engaging. She talked about her latest design projects, her love of photography, and her favorite hiking spots. As we reached a scenic overlook, we paused to catch our breath. The view was breathtaking, Boulder sprawled out below us, framed by the distant mountains. Claire turned to me, her expression thoughtful. You've been quieter than usual today, she said. What's on your mind? I hesitated, unsure how much to share. But something about Claire's sincerity made it easy to open up. Laura and I talked a few days ago, I said. It felt different. Like she's finally starting to see the damage she's done. Claire nodded, leaning against a nearby rock. And how does that make you feel? Conflicted, I admitted. Part of me wants to believe she's changing, that she regrets everything and wants to fix it. But another part of me wonders if it's too late, if we've already drifted too far apart. Claire studied me for a moment, then placed a hand on my arm. Jason, it's okay to not have all the answers right now. You've been through a lot, and it's going to take time to figure out what you really want. Just don't forget that you deserve happiness, too. Her words struck a chord, and for the first time, I felt a flicker of clarity. Maybe I didn't need to rush to make a decision. Maybe it was okay to take things one step at a time. As we headed back down the trail, the tension I'd been carrying for weeks began to ease. That evening, as I sat on the couch flipping through channels, my phone buzzed with another text. This time, it was from Laura. Laura, Jason, I've been thinking a lot about what you said. Can we meet again soon? I want to talk about the next steps, for both of us. I stared at the message, my emotions swirling. Was she finally ready to take responsibility? Or was this just another attempt to pull me back into her orbit? After a moment, I typed a reply. Let's meet tomorrow. Same time, same place. Laura, thank you. I'll be there. Before the meeting with Laura, I had one more plan on my calendar, dinner with Claire. We'd decided to try the Willow's Table, a trendy new restaurant downtown that was already gaining a reputation for its farm-to-table dishes and cozy ambience. Claire arrived in a sleek black dress, her usual casual style replaced with something more polished. I couldn't help but smile as she walked toward the table. You clean up well, I teased, pulling out her chair. So do you, she replied with a wink. The dinner was everything I needed, good food, easy conversation, and the kind of connection that reminded me life could still hold joy, even after heartbreak. As the evening wound down, Claire leaned in slightly, her expression serious. Jason, she said softly, I don't know where your journey with Laura will lead, but just know this, you're stronger than you think. And no matter what happens, I hope you find the happiness you deserve. Her words stayed with me long after we said goodnight. The next evening, I found myself once again waiting in the living room, the quiet hum of the clock on the wall marking the seconds until Laura's arrival. True to her word, she pulled into the driveway at exactly 7 p.m. As she stepped inside, I noticed a change in her demeanor. She looked more composed, but there was a certain vulnerability in her eyes that hadn't been there before. She wore a simple gray sweater and dark jeans, her usual air of confidence tempered by something softer. Jason, she began, setting her bag down by the door, thank you for meeting with me again. I know I don't deserve your patience, but I appreciate it. I nodded toward the couch. Let's get to it. What do you want to talk about? She sat down, folding her hands in her lap as she gathered her thoughts. I've been doing a lot of reflecting over the past few days, she said. Talking to the girls, revisiting old memories, and seeing you move on. It's made me realize just how much I've taken for granted. Her voice wavered slightly, but she pressed on. I know I've hurt you in ways I can't take back. And I know I don't have the right to ask for anything from you. But I need to tell you the truth, Jason, not just for you, but for me. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. I'm listening. Laura took a deep breath, her gaze fixed on her hands. When I said I wanted to explore, I thought it was about finding myself, rediscovering who I was outside of being your wife and the girl's mother. But the truth is, I was running away, from my own insecurities, my own fears. I thought chasing something new would fix the emptiness I felt inside, but all it did was make me realize how much I was losing in the process. Her words were raw, unfiltered, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I was hearing the real Laura, the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she continued. "But I need you to know that I'm ready to take responsibility for my mistakes. I've started therapy, not just to fix what's broken in our marriage, but to understand why I made those choices in the first place." She finally looked up, her eyes meeting mine. "Jason, I don't know if there's a future for us. But I want to try, if you'll let me. And if you can't, I'll understand." Her words hung in the air, heavy with emotion. I let them settle, my mind racing as I tried to process what she was saying. Part of me wanted to believe her, to trust that this was the beginning of something new. But another part, the part that had spent months feeling betrayed and abandoned, wasn't ready to let go of the hurt. "Laura," I said finally, my voice steady but firm, "I appreciate your honesty, and I can see that you're trying. But this isn't just about you anymore. It's about both of us, and whether or not we can rebuild what we've lost." She nodded slowly, her expression unreadable. "I understand," she said quietly. "I'm not saying no," I continued. "But I'm not saying yes, either. If we're going to try, it has to be from a place of mutual trust and respect. And that's going to take time." Laura's eyes glistened with unshed tears, but she didn't look away. "Time," she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. We sat in silence for a long moment, the weight of the conversation settling over us. Finally, Laura stood, picking up her bag. "Thank you for hearing me out," she said. "I won't push. I hope we can find a way forward, whatever that looks like." As she walked out the door, I felt a strange mix of emotions, relief, sadness, and the faintest flicker of hope. The following morning, I received a text from Claire. "Claire, morning, Jason. I know it's short notice, but there's a photography exhibit downtown tonight. Thought you might like to come along. Interested?" I stared at the message for a moment, feeling a pang of guilt. But then I remembered what Claire had said on our hike, that it was okay to take things one step at a time, to prioritize my own happiness for once. Sounds great. What time? Claire, 7 p.m. I'll pick you up. That evening, Claire arrived right on time, her usual casual elegance complemented by a navy dress and a light scarf. She greeted me with a warm smile as I climbed into her car. The exhibit was held at the Meridian Gallery, a sleek, modern space with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a stunning view of the city. Inside, the walls were adorned with black and white photographs, each one capturing moments of raw emotion and quiet beauty. Claire seemed completely in her element, pointing out details in the photos that I would have otherwise missed. Her passion was infectious, and for the first time in a long while, I found myself genuinely engaged in the moment. As we wandered through the gallery, we stopped in front of a photo of an older couple holding hands, their faces lined with years of laughter and hardship. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Claire said softly. "Yeah," I replied, my gaze lingering on the photo. "It's the kind of connection everyone hopes for." Claire turned to me, her expression thoughtful. "Do you think it's ever too late to find that kind of connection?" I hesitated, her question hitting closer to home than I'd expected. "I don't know," I admitted. "But I think it's worth trying." Her smile was small but genuine, and for the first time, I felt a sense of clarity. Maybe I didn't have all the answers yet, but I was finally starting to believe that the future held possibilities I hadn't even considered. Over the next few days, life seemed to settle into an uneasy rhythm. Laura had kept her distance, giving me space as I sorted through my emotions. Claire, on the other hand, had a way of grounding me in the present, her presence a quiet reminder that life could still hold joy and discovery. It was a Friday evening when my daughter, Lila, called unexpectedly. "Hey, Dad," she said, her tone hesitant. "Are you free to talk?" "Of course," I replied, concern creeping into my voice. "What's going on?" "It's about Mom," she said after a pause. I think she's trying to reach out to you, but she's scared. She's been different lately, quieter, more reflective. It's like she's finally realizing how much she's lost. Her words hit me harder than I'd expected. Over the past few weeks, I'd seen glimpses of that change in Laura, but hearing it from Lila made it feel more real. What do you think I should do? I asked, genuinely curious about her perspective. I think you should talk to her, Lila said. Not just for her, but for you. If there's even a chance you can find some kind of closure, or maybe even rebuild, don't you think it's worth trying? That night, I texted Laura. Can we meet tomorrow? I think it's time we have a real conversation about where we go from here. Her reply came almost instantly. Laura, yes. Thank you, Jason. Where? The park by the lake. Noon. Laura, I'll be there. The next day, the weather was unusually warm for late fall, the sun casting a golden glow over Pineview Lake. I arrived a few minutes early, finding a bench near the water where I could gather my thoughts. Laura arrived right on time, her demeanor subdued but calm. She wore a simple coat and scarf, her hair pulled back into a loose ponytail. Hi, she said softly as she approached. Hi, I replied, motioning for her to sit. For a moment, neither of us spoke, the quiet sounds of the lake filling the space between us. Finally, Laura broke the silence. I wasn't sure if you'd ever want to talk to me again, she admitted. After everything I've put you through, I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. I needed time, I said honestly. And I think you did, too. She nodded, her gaze fixed on the water. You're right. I've been doing a lot of soul-searching, trying to understand why I made the choices I did. And the truth is, I let my fear and insecurity control me. I thought chasing something new would fill the emptiness I felt, but it only made me realize how much I was throwing away. Her voice cracked, and she paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. I know I can't undo the damage I've done, but I want to try, to make things right, if you'll let me. Her words hung in the air, heavy with sincerity. For a moment, I felt the old anger and hurt bubble up, but it was tempered by something else, compassion, and maybe even a glimmer of hope. Laura, I said finally, I'm not sure where this leaves us. But if we're going to move forward, whether as partners, co-parents, or just friends, it has to come from a place of honesty and mutual respect. No more secrets, no more games. She nodded, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I can promise you that, she said. As we talked, Laura opened up about the therapy sessions she'd started attending, how they'd helped her confront parts of herself she'd spent years ignoring. She admitted that the person she'd been chasing wasn't another man, it was a version of herself she felt she'd lost somewhere along the way. It's not an excuse, she said, her voice trembling. But I needed to figure out who I was outside of being a wife and mother. I just wish I hadn't hurt you in the process. Her vulnerability was disarming, and for the first time, I felt like we were having an honest conversation, not as husband and wife, but as two people trying to find their way forward. By the time we left the park, I didn't have all the answers, but I felt a sense of clarity. Maybe there was a way to rebuild, slowly, carefully, and on new terms. That evening, Claire called. Hey, she said, her tone light but curious. How'd your meeting with Laura go? It was productive, I said cautiously. I think we're finally starting to understand each other, but it's going to take time. That's good to hear, Claire replied. You deserve closure, no matter what direction it takes. There was a pause, and then her tone shifted. Listen, Jason, I've been thinking. My brother is hosting a weekend retreat up in the mountains, just a small group, hiking, bonfires, that sort of thing. I thought it might be a good chance for you to clear your head. Interested? I hesitated, torn between the pull of the past and the possibility of something new. Let me think about it, I said finally. Of course, Claire said, her voice warm. Take your time. That night, as I sat on the couch staring out at the darkened street, I realized I was standing at a crossroads. Laura was offering the possibility of rebuilding, but it would take time, trust, and a willingness to confront the pain of the past. Claire, on the other hand, represented something new, a chance to step out of the shadows of my old life and into the light of something unknown but promising. For the first time in weeks, I felt like the choice was mine to make. The next few days were a whirlwind of emotions. Laura and I exchanged a few cordial texts, but I sensed she was waiting for me to make the next move. Meanwhile, Claire sent a casual reminder about the mountain retreat, her tone light but inviting. By Friday night, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the framed photo collage Emma had given me. The memories it held, the laughter, the milestones, the life Laura and I had built together, felt both comforting and bittersweet. I picked up my phone and dialed Claire's number. "Hey," she answered, her voice as warm as ever. "I wasn't sure if I'd hear from you before tomorrow." I took a deep breath. "I wanted to let you know I can't make it to the retreat." There was a brief pause, but Claire's reply was gentle. "I understand. I hope you find what you're looking for, Jason. You deserve it." "Thank you, Claire," I said, meaning it. "For everything." As I hung up, I felt a pang of sadness, but also a sense of certainty. Claire had been a bright spot during one of the darkest periods of my life, but I knew my path forward needed to start with facing the past, not running from it. The next morning, I texted Laura. Can we meet tonight? I think it's time we talk about how to move forward." Her response came quickly. "Laura, I'll be there." "Thank you, Jason." That evening, I prepared dinner, a simple pasta dish, something we used to enjoy together in the early years of our marriage. When Laura arrived, she seemed surprised by the effort but didn't comment on it. We ate in relative silence, the atmosphere tense but not hostile. After dinner, we moved to the living room, where I finally spoke. "Laura," I began, "I've spent a lot of time thinking about what you said at the park. And I believe you're trying to change. I see it in the way you've been with the girls, the way you've opened up to me. But rebuilding what we had isn't going to be easy, it's going to take time, and it's going to take work from both of us." She nodded, her expression earnest. "I know," she said softly. "And I'm ready for that. I don't expect us to go back to the way things were, I just want the chance to prove that I can be better." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees as I met her gaze. "I'm willing to try," I said. "But we need to take this slow. No rushing, no pretending everything's fine. We have to rebuild from the ground up." Tears welled in Laura's eyes, but she smiled through them. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for giving me a chance." Over the next several months, Laura and I began the difficult work of rebuilding our relationship. We attended couples therapy together, confronting the pain and resentment that had built up over the years. There were setbacks and moments of doubt, but there were also moments of connection, glimpses of the partnership we'd once shared. The girls noticed the change, too. Lila, ever the skeptic, gradually softened as she saw the effort both Laura and I were making. Emma, always the optimist, seemed genuinely hopeful that her parents might find their way back to each other. One evening, as Laura and I sat on the back porch watching the sunset, she reached over and took my hand. "Jason," she said quietly, "I know we still have a long way to go, but I'm grateful for every step we've taken together." I squeezed her hand, a small smile tugging at my lips. "Me too," I replied. Though our journey was far from over, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. Rebuilding wasn't just about forgiving Laura, it was about rediscovering myself, finding strength in the pain, and choosing to embrace the possibility of something better. As the stars began to dot the night sky, I looked over at Laura and realized that, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't just surviving. I was beginning to